The following podcast was recorded under the ink-black sky of the planet Cricket on July 21st, 2009 and contains no spoilers but some rumors regarding the possibility of an upcoming Doctor Who feature film. The Cloister Room, starring Tom Dickinson. Episode 001, The Small Screen, the Big Screen, and the Bigger on the Inside Screen. Hello, welcome to the Cloister Room, and this is your host, Tom Dickinson. 2 eyes, no e's. Yes, this is technically the first episode of the Cloister Room, but that does not mean I'm going to waste any time on some sort of introductory thing, because if you wanted that, you should have listened to episode 0 of the Cloister Room. Also, I would appreciate it if you could please pretend that the title of this episode is wittier than it actually is. At least it's unwieldy. I really do like unwieldy titles. And with all of this stuff out of the way, let's get on to the more obviously scripted portion of our podcast. In recent weeks, amidst discussion of Torchwood Children of Earth, the final David Tennant specials, and the upcoming Matt Smith season in 2010, a slightly less concrete Doctor Who project has been talked about on the internet. That is, the rumored Doctor Who feature film that is said to be in development, that's in air quotes, by the BBC. In this podcast, I'm going to discuss a bit about the history of these rumors and the history of Doctor Who films in general, both proposed and produced, as well as what I think about the likelihood of these current rumors, and of course, whether it would even be a good idea. In the 1960s, when the Daleks were at the height of their popularity, there were 2 feature films released which would not rightly be called Doctor Who movies, rather, Dalek movies. Both films starred Peter Cushing, who you may know as Grand Moff Tarkin from Star Wars, not as a Time Lord named the Doctor, but rather as a human scientist named Doctor who had invented his own TARDIS. The first film, Doctor Who and the Daleks, was based on a television story, The Daleks. And the second film, with a lovely unwieldy title, Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD, was based on the Dalek Invasion of Earth. A third film based on the chase was planned, but not produced. The Peter Cushing films, well, these are obviously outside of Doctor Who canon, but in the 1970s, there are a couple of notable attempts to produce Doctor Who films featuring the fourth Doctor, Tom Baker, which would have been in canon. One, conceived by Tom Baker and his co-star Ian Marter, featured the Doctor meeting the Devil. Tom Baker even accepted donations from fans to finance the film, which would have been called Doctor Who Meets Scratchman. Tom had to return the donations, and the film was never made. Another script, Doctor Who and the Cricket Men, was written by Douglas Adams, author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The film was not made, but the plot was later recycled into the third Hitchhiker book, Life, the Universe, and Everything. One of the better ones in the series, if you ask me. So attempts to make a Doctor Who film were particularly in earnest in the 1990s, after the classic series had been put on an indefinite hiatus, i.e., cancelled. A variety of Doctor Who feature films and television films were proposed and scripted, with a variety of big names attached to them, from Leonard Nimoy to Steven Spielberg. Perhaps you've heard of them. Some of these attempts would have been continuations of the canon of Doctor Who, but some of them would have been outside it, like the Cushing movies. The hope was that, if a feature film or a telefilm was successful, Doctor Who could be relaunched, possibly with a new continuity. Ultimately, the only successful attempt was the Doctor Who telemovie of 1996, co-produced by the BBC and Universal, and starring Paul McGann. Not a brilliant movie in my opinion, but I really do like Paul McGann's Doctor. Anyhow, although it was fairly successful in the UK, it was a ratings flop for Fox in the US, so Fox decided not to request a second film or a series. This left Universal with the rights to produce Doctor Who material, but no reason to do so. The rights reverted back to the BBC the following year, and the BB's plans for a Doctor Who movie went back into development, again, in air quotes, because this is actually development hell. To say a film is in development can mean almost anything, and in some cases it might mean that it's on the table, but nothing is happening with it, and that's development hell. That's the status that Doctor Who was in at the turn of the century, but as we all know, it was finally put back into production as a now successful television series that is pretty damn good, in my opinion. But the television revival was an entirely separate project, and so its realization does not mean that the movie ever left the development stage at all. After a short break, I'll return to talk about where I think the current rumors are coming from, and how likely I think a Doctor Who movie is, and why I think it's actually a pretty bad idea right now. And now for a brief but terribly urgent interruption.
Look, whenever you see me in this part of the town is pacing up and down like this, be a good chap and don't interrupt me, will you? Unless it's terribly urgent. It's not terribly urgent, is it?
This is Phil Collinson. You're listening to Radio Free Skaro.
Anyone who might listen to this in the UK,
you will guffaw with amazement.
Yeah, looks like you need a Piers Winger in here. That's a load-bearing winger.
I feel the impact of Torchwood.
But we had such hope for the character. Thinking, oh, wow, look at Adric, he's great. I'm sure he's starting off a little shaky here, but he'll come around. We've riled him up.
Do we need all these singing-type things for a bunch of nerds?
Pardon me, pedantor.
That's me, pedantor of the gutter.
There's the typical Burgess modesty we've all come to know and loathe.
This show has always been about warts and all, by God, and we'll keep doing it.
It's up on radiofreescaro.com.
Hooray!
Yes, this lowly podcast on its first episode does have the audacity to advertise a podcast on its 150th. Congrats to the three who rule. Now back to the script. Recently, Glenn Larson, the creator of Battlestar Galactica, has begun moving forward development on a Battlestar Galactica film that has been in development hell for quite some time. This version of Battlestar Galactica has nothing to do with the version on the Sci-Fi Channel, however you spell it, which was reimagined in 2003 by Ron Moore. And it would probably not be in continuity with it. This is an entirely separate project that was never really taken off the table, but was always in development. A similar situation is being talked about with regard to the new Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, based not on the 1997 reimagining, but on the 1992 film. The Doctor Who film that has been confirmed to be in development is, like those projects, more or less completely separate from the TV show from a production standpoint. It may, however, unlike those projects, be in established continuity. We really don't know either way, because nothing is concrete at the moment. And like those other projects, this is the key fact to remember. The movie is in development in air quotes, and that is by no means any guarantee that it will ever be made. We have no real idea of where the film is in the development process, or whether there is any real chance of it happening. Personally, I've been skeptical. This film has been rumored several times before and during the run of the new series, and, at first, when the BBC last put out word saying that a Doctor Who movie was in development, there was little reason to believe that this time was going to be different from any of the previous. As a result, I sort of wrote it off at the time, but in recent weeks, new rumors have been floating around the internet which, if unfounded, are at least logical. Because this week, David Tennant, Russell T Davies, and Eros Lynn are all flying over to the United States to host a panel at San Diego Comic-Con, which is essentially the be-all and end-all of nerd pop culture events. Lots of film announcements happen there every year, and so some sites like IO9 have reported rumors about a Doctor Who movie starring David Tennant, written by Russell T Davies, and directed by Eros Lynn. I do, of course, have a note in my script reminding me to pronounce Eros Lynn's name correctly, so I sure hope I have. Simple math would dictate that this film would not be released until at least 2 years from now, possibly much, much later. But then the issue becomes obvious. In 2011 or 2012, David Tennant would not be the Doctor anymore. Matt Smith would be the Doctor, or the next guy maybe, and Stephen Moffat will have replaced Russell T Davies as the writer, or maybe the next guy after him. What this would mean is that while Moffat and Smith are working together on the television series, Davies and Tennant would be working on the movie. Now, there are several reasons why this is a good idea. For one thing, it keeps Tennant and Davies involved in a major Doctor Who product, which is a good thing, because they are both instrumental to the current mainstream success of Doctor Who. Furthermore, it would allow work on a film to move forward without the television series getting in the way of the production schedule, and vice versa. However, I think these are outweighed by two major reasons it's a bad idea. The first reason is that Russell T Davies is going to have a very hard time finding a story that justifies a feature film rather than a television format. Usually film stories are much bigger than their television counterparts, but Davies' television finales are already ludicrously epic in scale. So much so that a feature film with an even bigger scale would likely be a gigantic mess. Secondly, and more importantly, David Tennant casts a long shadow, perhaps even longer than the shadow of Tom Baker, and Matt Smith is going to have a hard enough time establishing himself as the Doctor under current circumstances. Having David Tennant involved in a Doctor Who project for release in 2011 or 2012, a project that is larger in budget and audience than the TV show, is going to cause a public perception that he is still the Doctor. I think that the viewers of Doctor Who can embrace Matt Smith, but that can only happen if David Tennant moves out of the way. It's like Conan O'Brien finally becoming the host of The Tonight Show, only to find out that his predecessor, Jay Leno, hasn't really left, he's just been bumped up to his own show. Of course, a Doctor Who film by Davies and Lynn starring Tennant might be good. It might be great. I'd certainly be towards the front of the line to see it, but I'd still be a bit disappointed in David Tennant, Russell T Davies, and Eros Lynn if they did it, because even a good 10th Doctor movie might be unhealthy for Doctor Who as a whole. I've always thought of David Tennant as having an enormous amount of respect for the role, and I don't really want to see his desire to continue playing the Doctor trump that respect at Matt Smith's expense. But maybe these rumors are just rumors. Maybe the only reason that Russell T Davies, Eros Lynn, and David Tennant are coming to the States is to promote David Tennant's final episodes on BBC America. Either way, I'll be prepared for that news to drop at the end of the week. That's about all I have for you this week on the first ever real episode of The Cloister Room. Next week will be an episode entirely devoted to the character of Jack Harkness from Doctor Who and Torchwood. Where the character has gone, where he's going now in Children of Earth, and where I think he should or shouldn't go next. If you have any thoughts on that topic, or on the topic of the movie, or on pretty much any other topic at all, you can send me a message at feedback@thecloisterroom.com. Or you can send me a reply on Twitter to @thecloisterroom. I'd like to use the feedback as a major component of these episodes, but I'm going to wait until I've built up some sort of audience that's giving me some sort of feedback on a regular basis. To find me on the web, go to thecloisterroom.com. Well, eventually you'll be able to go to thecloisterroom.com. It's not set up yet, so in the meantime, I guess just go to my Twitter profile. And the Cloister Room also now has an iTunes listing, so you can look up the Cloister Room on iTunes if you really want to. So until next week, this is your host, Tom Dickinson, 2 Eyes, No E's, signing off. Listening to The Cloister Room, episode 001, which is a fan-made production that is not affiliated with the BBC or anyone actually reputable. All characters and names and things like that are the property of their copyright holders and are not owned by me, nor is much of anything anymore. Tune in next week for another poorly thought out and hastily tacked on disclaimer just like this one.